Welcome to Sociology Burger. Do you want fries with it? If you, like us, have been absolutely glued to the news this week, watching what's been unfolding in Venezuela.
Truly shocking.
The U.S. action, the removal of Nicolas Maduro, the whole global landscape has just fundamentally shifted.
It really has.
And for foreign policy watchers, this wasn't just some surprise event out of the blue. This was the policy made real.
It absolutely was. What we are seeing now is really the operational consequence of a document that came out months ago.
The National Security Strategy of the United States of America, November 2025.
That's the one. It's the blueprint. The immediate global reaction was kind of summed up best by Pippa Norris on social media. She tweeted that the document was, quote, incoherent and shocking.
I remember that tweet.
But she added this really crucial part. She said it was also an accurate reflection of Trump's vision of the world. Read and be afraid.
And that is exactly our mission today. We're going to skip past the geopolitical hot takes, ignore the gossip, and get right into the source material.
Yeah.
We need to find the specific policies, the ones buried in this NSS 2025, that didn't just suggest this could happen, but that explicitly set the strategic mandate for the kind of aggressive preemptive action we just saw.
And when you look at the NSS, it frames itself as a necessary reset. The president's opening address, right on pages I and II, it just sets the tone immediately. It says that for too long, American strategy, quote, went astray. It calls the past 3 decades a series of, laundry lists of wishes.
Laundry lists of wishes?
Yeah, where the U.S. overcommitted everywhere, made destructive bets on globalism, and let allies basically offload their defense costs onto the American taxpayer.
So if the old strategy was this laundry list, this new one claims to be grounded in, I guess, a starker reality.
That's the pitch. The NSS defines strategy as a concrete plan that links your desired ends to the means you actually have.
Right.
It demands a clear-eyed look at what America wants and what tools it's actually willing to use to get it.
Yep.
And the document presents itself as the necessary welcome correction.
Okay, so let's unpack that ideological core. Section 1, the foundations of America first. The stated purpose here is to usher in a new golden age.
And it's motivated, as the document says, by what works for America, or in 2 words, America first.
It argues this isn't about left to right-wing dogma, but just pure pragmatic national self-interest.
But the goals it defines for the nation, the wants overall, are, they're pretty radical.
How so?
Survival as an independent, sovereign republic, that's the obvious baseline. But then it immediately shifts to what is really domestic policy, just dressed up as security policy.
Okay.
They demand full control over borders and immigration. It explicitly says they want a world that stops destabilizing population flows, not one that facilitates them.
And the economic wants are really the engine of this whole thing. It demands the world's most robust industrial base.
And it mandates that cultivating that industrial strength must be the highest priority of national economic policy. I mean, that's a complete reversal of decades of free market globalization orthodoxy.
A huge reversal.
A massive pivot. And here's the most unique, and I think often the most controversial, domestic demand. The NSS ties national security directly to the, quote, restoration and reinvigoration of American spiritual and cultural health.
What does that even mean in a policy document?
It includes an explicit desire for growing numbers of strong traditional families. It argues that without this internal societal strength, no long-term security is even possible.
So it's elevating demographic and cultural stability to the same level as, military readiness.
Exactly. It completely reframes the whole definition of national security.
Okay, so turning to the global rules they set up. Section 4.1 lays out these defining principles of the strategy. The document uses this very complex, almost philosophical language.
Oh, yeah. Pragmatic without being pragmatist. Realistic without being realist.
Right. Principled without being idealistic and so on. But behind all that verbal gymnastics, there are really 2 foundational points.
The first is the primacy of nations. The world just works best, according to this view, when nations fiercely prioritize their own interests, not global bodies, not treaties.
It's transactional and self-serving.
Completely. And the second point is the predisposition to non-interventionism.
This is the one I find so jarring.
It is. The founders set this as the standard, and while the document admits you can't rigidly adhere to it, it claims this has to set an extremely high bar for any justified military intervention.
A high bar that was just, what, completely ignored?
Well, that's the tension, right? That's the core paradox of the whole strategy. And to justify their muscular approach, they spend a lot of time establishing President Trump as the president of peace.
The president of peace.
Citing his ability to negotiate peace in 8 different conflicts in 8 months of his second term.
That claim alone is audacious. I mean, they mentioned successful talks between Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the DRC and Rwanda. Those are major regional disputes.
Yes, but the most astonishing claims, the ones that really define their confidence, are the settlements they say they brokered between Pakistan and India and between Israel and Iran.
Israel and Iran.
A negotiation cited as ending the conflict in Gaza and returning all living hostages. If you believe the administration successfully negotiated peace between Israel and Iran, it establishes a precedent for this kind of aggressive, unconventional diplomacy that they believe is simply beyond the traditional foreign policy establishment.
So that framing basically licenses them to act far outside of established diplomatic norms.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's look at the global framework this whole peace through strength approach uses. Section 2, the 5 core foreign policy interests, or what we want in and from the world.
And the first one is the critical one for what's happening right now, the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
The goal here is explicitly about regional control, ensuring stability to prevent mass migration, cooperating against narco-terrorists and cartels, and most crucially, asserting and enforcing a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine.
That is some heavy historical freight. When you say Monroe Doctrine, you're invoking nearly 2 centuries of U.S. assertion and often intervention in Latin America.
It's a huge signal.
What else is on their list?
Economic security is paramount, stopping foreign damage to the American economy. They also prioritize supporting European allies, but there's a big asterisk there we'll get to.
Okay.
Then preventing adversarial power from dominating the Middle East while avoiding forever wars. And finally, ensuring U.S. technology, AI, biotech, quantum computing drives the world forward.
And the means to get this stuff done are defined by 2 huge shifts. The first one is the era of mass migration is over.
The language here is just completely unambiguous. Border security is defined as the primary element of national security.
Not an element, but the primary element.
The primary element. It's about protecting against, quote, invasion, not just from unchecked migration, but from cross-border threats. It asserts that defining who enters the U.S. is the very definition of sovereignty, and they will use every single tool to enforce it.
And the second priority is a huge strategic and financial realignment. Burden sharing and burden shifting.
Yeah.
This is where the transactional nature really hits our allies.
Exactly. The days of the U.S. propping up the whole world order are, in their view, finished. The document points to the Hague Commitment.
The commitment.
It demands that NATO countries pledge 5% of their GDP to defense. Now, for the average listener, that might sound like a technicality, but it's a revolutionary demand.
5% that's massive.
It's huge. Currently, NATO nations struggle to even hit 2%. Demanding 5% is a massive, immediate financial and strategic burden shift. It's intended to force allies to decide if they're really committed to collective security or if they prefer the U.S. to just pivot elsewhere.
And that's fascinating because it connects right back to prioritizing national interests. The NSS is saying, if you won't step up to defend your own neighborhood, we will reallocate our resources to secure our neighborhood.
Which brings us directly to Section 3, the Western Hemisphere.
And this is it. This is the operational mandate for what we just saw in Venezuela.
This is where the strategy shifts from, philosophy to actual enforcement. The Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, that's in Section IV.3a, it states the U.S. will reassert and enforce to restore American preeminence.
And what does that mean in practice?
It has 2 non-negotiable aims. First, to deny non-hemispheric competitors, think China, Russia, Iran, the ability to position forces or any kind of threatening capabilities. And second,
Go on.
To deny them ownership or control of strategically vital assets in the hemisphere.
That denial of ownership is absolutely key, isn't it? It means the U.S. sees foreign investment in strategic infrastructure, ports, energy grids, natural resources as a direct national security threat if it comes from a competitor.
That is a sweeping declaration of a sphere of influence.
It really is.
And the immediate actionable goals are summed up as enlist and expand. Enlist, establish friends to control migration and neutralize cartels. Expand by cultivating new partners who see the U.S. as their main economic and security partner.
But the real policy foundation for aggressive action is in the military and economic means. So let's look at the military shift first.
The NSS demands a readjustment of the global military presence, moving it away from other theaters to focus on urgent threats right here in our hemisphere.
So we're talking about moving serious assets back home.
And that reallocation comes with brand new rules of engagement. The document authorizes targeted deployments to secure the border and to defeat cartels.
And here's the line that jumped out at me.
Including, where necessary, the use of lethal force to replace the failed law enforcement-only strategy of the past decades.
Yeah, there it is.
That's it. The fact that the NSS explicitly authorizes lethal military force against non-state actors like cartels and uses that language for the region, that's the ultimate legal pre-authorization for what we just saw.
Wow. That's a huge shift, making counter-cartel ops a national security priority, not just a law enforcement problem. And this is all buttressed by the economic policy.
Right. We saw the U.S. use crushing financial pressure in Venezuela. The NSS mandates that.
How so?
It says the U.S. will use tariffs and reciprocal trade agreements as leverage. But the real policy nugget, the thing that gives them this incredible power, is the mandate it sets.
Which is what?
Any trade agreements with countries that depend on the U.S. must now include terms for sole source contracts for American companies.
Sole source contracts. So you're saying they're eliminating competitive bidding and forcing these governments to buy all their infrastructure or technology from American firms.
Exactly. It's naked economic preeminence.
Wow.
The strategy is designed to create this relationship of total commercial and financial dependence within the hemisphere, explicitly cutting out competitors. And it calls for rolling back adversarial influence by exposing the hidden costs, espionage, cybersecurity, debt traps that come with supposedly low-cost foreign aid.
They want to make the choice for regional partners binary.
American prosperity and security or foreign debt and vulnerability. That's the choice.
So when we put all of that together, the Trump corollary, authorizing lethal force, the economic leverage of sole source contracts, it becomes abundantly clear that the action against the Venezuelan regime wasn't random at all.
Not at all. It was a precise, high-stakes execution of a carefully written, preemptive strategic blueprint. But the strategy doesn't stop here. Let's briefly pivot to Section 4, starting with Asia,
where the goals is about winning the economic future while trying to avoid military confrontation.
Right. The NSS sees China through a lens of economic competition, not primarily military conflict. It notes that the administration, quote, single-handedly reversed more than 3 decades of mistaken American assumptions about China.
But China's adapted, right?
Oh, very quickly. While the U.S. tariff policy hit Western trade, China just strengthened its supply chains and its market presence in low- and middle-income countries. The document reveals a surprising metric. China's exports to low-income countries are now nearly 4 times its exports to the U.S.
So the challenge isn't just bilateral trade anymore. It's a global economic rivalry in the developing world.
It is. Deterrence is still crucial, of course, particularly regarding Taiwan because of semiconductors and access to the second island chain.
For our listeners who might not be familiar, what is the second island chain and why does the NSS see it as so non-negotiable?
The second island chain is essentially a line that runs from Japan down through Guam and Micronesia. It's strategically vital because it defines the western reach of U.S. naval and air power in the Pacific.
So it's about power projection.
It's about power projection and ensuring vital shipping lanes stay open. About 1/3 of all global shipping passes through the South China Sea every year.
Okay, let's shift to Europe, because this is where the ideological critique gets really intense. The strategy expresses this profound civilizational concern about Europe.
This is highly, highly charged language. The document states that Europe is losing its global GDP share from 25% in 1990 down to 14% today, and it's facing the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure.
Civilizational erasure? What do they mean by that?
They tie it to 3 things: uncontrolled migration, censorship, political crises, and critically cratering birth rates. The policy views that Europe needs to remain European and abandon what the strategy calls its failed focus on regulatory suffocation.
That is a direct challenge to the domestic policies and, frankly, the values of key European allies.
Yeah.
How does this strategy handle the war in Ukraine and Russia?
It's handled in a purely transactional way. U.S. interests, the strategy argues, require the negotiation of an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine.
Yes, end it.
End it. The goal is twofold: Stabilize global economies and reestablish strategic stability with Russia. There's no language about military victory or restoring territory. It's about ending the conflict as quickly as possible to serve American economic interests.
And this is combined with a really sharp critique of the very European leaders the U.S. is supposedly allied with.
Absolutely. The administration claims it's at odds with European officials who hold unrealistic expectations for the war and who are leading unstable minority governments that trample on basic principles of democracy to suppress opposition.
And then there's the final, very controversial part.
Right. The policy encourages the growing influence of patriotic European parties in the region, which are often populist or nationalist movements that are diametrically opposed to the established European mainstream.
So, synthesizing everything we've just covered, the NSS 2025 isn't a retreat into isolationism, not at all. It's an assertion of self-interested, unilateral, and transactional dominance.
Backed by a significant reallocation of military and economic power. That's the takeaway. It's a decisive move away from global altruism and toward narrowly defined national interests. This strategy is built on reshoring, energy dominance, and massive economic leverage.
And critically, on assortive regional preeminence.
The Monroe Doctrine's Trump Corollary is the core principle of its entire foreign policy.
And for you, the listener, that brings us right back to where we started, with the events in Venezuela. The removal of Maduro was not an act of desperation, it was a policy execution.
It was.
The NSS 2025 provided the clear strategic authorization for it, from the Trump Corollary targeting non-hemispheric competitors to the justification for using lethal force against regional threats. It was all there, in writing.
And that aggressive action forces us to reconsider the NSS's own stated ideals. The document repeatedly commits to a predisposition to non-interventionism, which is supposed to set a high bar for justified intervention.
A very high bar.
Yet the policy then lays out this highly detailed, militarized, and economically coercive plan for the Western Hemisphere, defining nearly any adversarial presence there as a direct national security threat. So this raises an important question for you to consider. Does the NSS, through this Trump corollary, effectively define intervention as something to be avoided only outside the Americas? Is it basically declaring the Western Hemisphere exempt from its own non-intervention principle? And if so, how do global allies, particularly in Europe and Asia, react when they see the U.S. enforcing a standard in its own neighborhood that it refuses to apply for its partners elsewhere?